Good morning, Springfield. Happy Friday. The date is March 26th, and we are back with another episode of A Word with the City Manager. I'm your host, Logan Cobbs.
And I am City Manager Brian Heck.
See, we got that down pat.
We did better than we did 2 weeks ago. Yes. So
thank you guys for joining us today. So today, and I know we talked about this last week as well, but we really want to drive home here. We're going to be talking about Levy again. So Brian, thank you for joining us. Let's get right to it, okay?
Yeah, definitely. So what do you want to know this week, Logan?
Let's do another brief overview. So tell me about the levy in May. What is it? What's it for?
Yes. So back in May of 2017, our voters, thank you very much, approved a 0.4% increase to our income tax. Income tax is the primary source of revenue for municipalities in the state of Ohio. Cities cannot collect sales tax, and we actually collect very little property tax. Most of your property taxes go to the school districts in Ohio. And so income tax is our revenue source. And so after the cuts that we experienced, as well as every other local government experienced in the state of Ohio, we had to go out and ask our voters for that additional increase of 0.4%. Again, that was approved in May of 2017 and went into effect July of that year. And it is set to expire at the end of 2022. And so we have continued to evaluate our finances and our budget. And we do know that, again, with the cuts that we have seen from the state of Ohio, as well as the impact of COVID-19, that this levy will be necessary to continue. But again, we don't want to ask for more than what is needed for the services that we have in our community. And so we are doing a 10-year renewal of that levy. And we can talk a little bit about why 10 years as opposed to the current term, which is 5.5 years during this podcast. But so it is a renewal. So May 4th of this year will be a renewal of the 0.4% increase that was again passed originally in May of 2017. So our income tax rate would be at 2.4%. And again, that is on earned income tax. So it does not impact retirement benefits, disability benefits, and so forth. It's truly on earned income and also net profit for businesses.
Brian, what does earned income mean? So if I'm retired.
Yeah, it's again, essentially earned income is wages.
Okay.
And then again, net profit on businesses.
So if I'm retired, that's not.
Yeah. So if you receive a Social Security benefit or some other type of retirement benefit, you would not be subject to our income tax.
Okay. And I do see some questions coming in. As always, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the comment section below. One more question, Brian, and then we'll start taking questions from the audience.
Yeah.
So this levy, this renewal levy, is for 10 years, whereas the one in 17 was for 5.5. Why are we doing 10 years versus the 5?
Yeah, and that's a great question. That's a question that's been coming up. And what we learned during this first 5.5 years is really the planning that needs to essentially go into the infrastructure projects that are associated with this levy. So some of the promises that were made and have been kept, one is investing in our infrastructure and equipment for our first responders on the police and the fire side, as well as restarting our neighborhood street program. And again, the neighborhood street program is our residential streets, those that are in the neighborhoods. And so what we have learned is, as we started those paving projects, as you can imagine, if the roads are in pretty poor condition, the underground infrastructure, our water, our sewer, stormwater infrastructure is also in need of repair. And we want to maximize and protect the investments that we're making in our community. And so we have been going in, and again, we have to also repair or fix those underground utilities before we go in and pave. Because again, what we don't want to have happen is we go in and pave a roadway and then we're immediately in there having to tear it up because the a water main break or a sewer line fails or collapses, and we have to go in and dig out that infrastructure. So
it allows us to be proactive and to really plan.
Yes,
I think that's helpful when you're using taxpayer dollars to really be able to think ahead.
We want to efficiently and effectively utilize the resources that we're provided from our community, and so we feel we need to make sure that we're planning ahead. Again, in why 10 years, and we talk about the investment in the infrastructure and equipment for our first responders. Specifically on the fire side, a lot of that apparatus is extremely expensive, so we have to plan ahead for those purchases. This year, as part of the current income tax, we are purchasing a new ladder truck to replace one of our aging and very old apparatus that's in our use of our fire division, and that costs between 1.2 and 1.3 million dollars. That's a big expense, and so you have to plan ahead for those expenses. Another piece of this levy, and again why 10 years, is we need to make an investment in our fire stations. So our fire stations average age is 56 years old. The newest station was built in 1981, and so we need to invest in those. We need to modernize those stations, those existing stations, and we're going to have to look at replacing one, if not two, stations during that 10-year time frame, because for example, Station 3, which is on Selma Road, right now it has a 26, 27 plus year old rescue engine operating out of it. It is on its last leg. We keep band-aiding it and keeping it going, but one day it's not going to be working, and we need to replace that engine. The problem is, if we replace that engine, a new engine would not fit in that station because of the height of that current station there. And so we have to look at upgrading our stations, modernizing them. One of the things that we've been really successful in is diversifying our workforce, and specifically on the fire side, we're seeing more female firefighters, which is awesome. But our facilities are not equipped. They don't have separate restroom facilities, shower facilities, locker rooms, sleeping quarters. Those are things that we need to do to modernize our stations for that diversification of our workforce.
It's a good explanation. Thank you. So, Brian, we do have a question. And the question is, what if we pay two local taxes? We pay city and Northeast local tax.
Yes. So there are school districts have been recently putting their own income tax issues on the ballot. I actually have, very similar to you, I live actually in the Northeastern School District. I live inside the city of Springfield, but I also live within the Northeastern Local School District. So I pay that same 1% to Northeastern. That again is something that the Northeastern schools put separately on the ballot to supplement their property tax that they receive. So the school district receives a good portion of the property taxes, but then Northeastern and several other, I think, area school districts have now started putting income tax as a means or a supplement to their revenue sources as well. So separate from the city's income tax, school districts are allowed by state law to put either income tax or property tax on the ballot. And again, sales tax is only allowed to be collected by the state and county government. So the city does not have the ability or option to do a sales tax or receive sales tax revenues. Our primary source is the income tax.
Yep, that was a good question. Thank you. So Brian, tell me a little bit. We've talked about why we need this tax, but could you go into a little bit more detail about the cuts that happened at the state level?
Yes. And so the state back in 2009, 2010, when they were experiencing their own fiscal emergency, they utilized the local government fund, which the local government fund was a promise the state made when they increased their tax level throughout the state of Ohio, that they were going to push dollars down to the local level for local investment. for local governments to use. That includes counties, townships, and cities. And so they started cutting those funds so that they could balance their budget. And so, for example, in 2007, we received approximately $5.4 million from the state of Ohio. In 2020, we received about $1.9 million in funding from the state of Ohio. And the projections that they have provided for 2021 show a number in the $1.5 to $1.6 million range. So you can see $5.4 million down to 1.5, 1.6 is crazy.
Significant, yeah. So, Brian, Mike and Melissa Martin say as well, and city taxpayers going to pay for a bad job on Belmont Avenue pavement?
Yes. So, Mike and Melissa, thank you for your question. Thank you for tuning in. We are just as upset about the condition of Belmont and the investment that was made there. We did receive that project was primarily funded from federal and state sources, but regardless, it is a bad job, and we are holding the contractor accountable for that. The paving contractor that did that did not do a good job. Our inspectors notified them immediately that it was not a good job, and so we are working with them to plan when asphalt plants open, which asphalt plants don't open till usually the end of April, first part of May, is to get that contractor back in here in Springfield and fix that problem. So Belmont Avenue, the condition that it is in now, that is not the condition it's going to be in. Because we are going to hold that contractor accountable. Again, we notified them immediately that that pavement job was not correct. And that they would need to shave it back down. It's the top surface that is the problem. So they will have to shave that top surface down, and they're going to have to repave that. So we are working hard to get that. We recognize it. Again, our inspectors recognized it immediately, and we're going to hold that contractor accountable.
Perfect. So, Brian, Monica's question fits into my next question. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then you can answer them all at once. So Monica's question is, look over the whole budget for the city, and where does all the money go? Maybe cuts can be made to not raise taxes. And I think this fits in with Drew's comment from a couple of years ago when he asked about a couple of weeks ago when he asked about the performance financial management audit that was done, which really told us where we could make cuts in the city, and some of those have been made. So maybe you could address Monica's comment and then the audit as a whole, what that said and what we did in response to it.
Yeah. No, Monica, that's a great point. And that is something that we wanted to do. And we did that actually before we even went out to the voters in 2016 and 2017. We established what was called a Community Financial Advisory Committee, which was made up of a group of business and community leaders to analyze and look at our budget. Because sometimes, you become too close to things and maybe you're missing something, or maybe there's a stone that you're not turning over that we weren't seeing. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't missing something, that the increase in revenue wasn't just the only solution to this.
Absolutely.
And so that Community Financial Advisory Committee analyzed our finances. They, just like us, there were no stones unturned, but they did make some recommendations. One of those recommendations was to have a third-party financial audit completed, which we did. We worked in partnership with the Greater Springfield Chamber of Commerce, which is now the Greater Springfield Partnership, and hired Performance Financial Management. They're a company out of Pennsylvania, based out of Pennsylvania. They do this across the nation, where they come in and do financial audits specifically for government agencies. And again, looking for ways that we can be more efficient and more effective with the resources that we have. And so they made several recommendations. And so some of those things that they asked us to continue to look at and analyze, healthcare. Healthcare is a big piece of any business. That's a cost that any business is experiencing. Substantial increases in year after year. And so we needed to find a way to get that under control. And so one of the decisions that we made and looked into was actually going to a self-insured model. And that self-insured model has been able to save us dollars significantly. So in 2019, the first year, we were able to realize only a 2% increase in our healthcare premium. That was huge because we were experiencing double digits, 15, 17% increases in our healthcare, and that's just not sustainable long term. And then in 2020, we were actually able to realize a 0% increase in those premiums.
Wonderful.
And in 21, we were able to budget for a 0% increase as well. So switching to the self-insured model was definitely a win for the organization, but a win for the community because that ultimately saves dollars in our budget. Another area that they asked us to consider was leasing vehicles. And so one of the things is, as you can imagine, we have heavy equipment. Those pieces of equipment are expensive.
Sure.
And outlaying that type of cash in 1 year can have a significant impact on a budget and limit the ability for us to do other things as well, other infrastructure projects in the community. So one purchase could impact other purchases or other investments. And so they said we should look at leasing, lease to purchase of vehicles. And so we have been analyzing that on a year-to-year basis. And what we have found is the larger vehicles, those ones that are especially $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 or more, it has been more advantageous for us to lease those, a lease to purchase on those. And especially with the interest rates where they're at now, it's been a positive for our budget in how we're moving forward. Another big piece that they wanted both the Community Financial Advisory Committee and PFM, Performance Financial Management, wanted us to look at was the golf course operations. And so prior to 2017, we contracted with NTPRD and they managed the golf course. What we were seeing was a $200,000 to $300,000 subsidy for that golf course out there at Reed Park. So the north and south courses that are located out there. So one of the things that we looked into off of their recommendations was leasing that to a private entity. And so we've been able to lease that to a private group. They've leased that facility since 2017 and operated it and maintained it. And we were able to cut down that $200,000 to $300,000 subsidy. Our commitment now is approximately $36,000 a year.
Wow.
So we were able to reduce from $200,000 to $300,000 down to $36,000. Another area, EMS billing. Looking at the service that we provide for EMS. And as you know, in the city, residents are not hard billed. So if you do in fact have to use our medic service to be taken to the hospital, your insurance will be billed, but you will not be hard billed for that later, based off of what the insurance pays. And one of the things that we were finding though is we were not capturing the insurance dollars coming from that. And so we did switch EMS billing companies in 2019, and we have seen an increase of those revenues. We've been able to capture more of those insurance dollars. And originally we were subsidizing in 2019, 2018, that fund by about $1 million out of our general fund. And we were able in 2020 to cut that down to $300,000 because of the changes that we made. And then we're also partnering with other organizations as well. The hospital, we're partnering with them on what's called a health data exchange that will help both entities out and provide benefit to both organizations, but then also with United Way and 211. There's a lot of times that the calls that we receive at 911 and have to send crews out on, they are not emergencies.
Right.
Yes, somebody needs access to resources, but the resource is not an emergency resource and is not our medic crew or our fire or police. And so we're trying to partner with United Way on educating the community about 211. 211 is something that provides access to resources, provides connections to resources in our community. And a lot of times it's a better call than calling 911.
Right.
And then we're also looking at shared services as a part of the opportunities, because if there's ways that we can partner with other agencies, there's no reason to duplicate services. Some examples of that was the GIS agreement with the county. We had a staff person that did our GIS services, and when that position was eliminated, we, instead of hiring that, we were able to partner with the county, which created a savings. We pay the county $45,000 a year, the county auditor's office. It's been a great partnership, and they provide those GIS services to our organization and to the community. We've also consolidated dispatch services. So we're working with the county now. It's run under the county sheriff's office, and that created a savings of almost $750,000 in the first year. On average, they're anticipating it's going to be about $250,000 annually that we'll see in savings. But again, it's looking at ways to efficiently and effectively use the resources that were provided in the community. So those are just some examples of the things that we're doing, because yes, it's not just about increasing that revenue. It's also looking at those expenditures. And again, how can we efficiently and effectively utilize the resources that we have that the community provides us?
I think that was a good point, Brian. When we talk about being financially responsible, when we talk about being more efficient, right? So the first thought wasn't let's go out for income tax. You looked at other ways to cut costs and to really look at how we can lower our cost with some of the resources that we already have. So I think that's very important to know.
Yeah.
So we have some additional questions coming in. One from Tony that says, when can we expect to see repairs done to the streets in Belmont Meadows? They were replaced in 94 to 95 and are in poor repair. So thank you for your question, Tony.
Yeah, Tony, thank you for joining us this morning. I will look in specifically to the Belmont Meadows. Again, part of this is trying to plan ahead. So we do have the streets planned for 21 and 22. But I will get with our construction superintendent and our street superintendent and make sure they're aware of Belmont Meadows. If there's specific problems now, understanding that paving is the ultimate solution, but if there's some potholes and stuff, please make us aware of that, and we'll get those fixed immediately. But I will work to understand when Belmont Meadows might see paving in their area. Also, one of the things that we just did, partnering with the Transportation Coordinating Committee, is we did a pavement condition rating throughout the city. And so we were able to get an understanding of all of our streets within the city of Springfield and rate them on their condition. And so I will see where Belmont Meadows falls in that in comparison to other streets, but look to have an answer for you.
Thank you. So Tony has another question, and it says that the 2017 levy passed the second time because the city threatened to cut police, fire, and shut down the police station. So what are your thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, so actually we did have to shut those things down. I mean, that's a reality that we all have to face, because with the decrease in revenue from the state, we were faced with making cuts if there wasn't a change. And that included looking at all of our services that we provide. And so we actually did, after it failed in 2016, we did have to actually close down the Johnny Lytle Police Substation. We had to close down Station 5, which is located on Commerce. But those are realities that we all have to face. We are without revenue sources, we are going to have to make cuts, and that's the same holds true now. Is we want to continue to provide the best services for our community, but obviously those things take dollars to be able to provide. And so I understand it's understood or seen. Some see it as a fear tactic. It's really not. It's the reality of where we're at, and local governments across Ohio are faced with this. And again, a lot of it all boils back down to the cuts in local government fund that came starting in 2010. But it is a challenge that all communities are facing. And so if the dollars aren't there there are cuts that we're going to have to make. And we did actually make those cuts. And fortunately, when the levy passed in May, we were able to open back up Commerce,
Gotcha.
the station on Commerce, Station 5, and also reopen the Johnny Lytle Police Substation.
So Brian, when is this levy going to be on the ballot?
Yes. So this ballot issue will be on the May 4th ballot. So that's coming up just over a month right now. This will be appearing on the ballot.
Okay. And just as a response to your comment, Brian, Tony said that the first responders should not be the first ones on the chopping block.
Understood, and they weren't the first on the chopping block, but over 75% of our general fund operations budget goes towards public safety, and so there's no way to avoid some cuts not being felt across the organization, which includes on the first responder side. But totally understand your viewpoint on that, Tony. It's not something that I want to do. We want to do. It's just looking at the expenditures that we have, and again, when that much money of the budget is going towards that, there's going to be some cuts felt across the organization.
So we have a question from Gayassi. I apologize if I butchered that.
I think it's actually Giassi, Giassi Jones. I've talked to Giassi on the phone recently. Wonderful. And totally, I know about Historic Route 40, and I have talked with our service center about that on 40 there. A lot of us see that as Main Street. It is part of Route 40, and it is in bad shape. It is going to be an expensive fix. There is a sewer project, as I know Giassi knows, that we're going to be taking on, and we're going to have to take a look at how we get that funded. So that is something that we want to do. We're going to maintain it in the best manner that we can right now, but we're going to understand that paving is the ultimate solution for most of our roadways. And so we're going to try to get that fit into the schedule, but that's a large one. That's a very expensive one. And it's probably going to be a reconstruction.
Thank you, Brian. And just for those viewing at home, Giassi did ask about repaving Route 40 from Greenmont to BP on the west side. So thank you for your response there. So Brian, we're going to take these last two questions. We're getting close on time. So let's take these last two questions from Monica, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So Monica asks about the city workers. Why not the other city workers? I think that's really getting to the root of how do you determine where cuts are being made?
Again, so the impact of the local government fund was specifically on our general fund operations. So we have to look at what is funded through our general fund, which again, a lot of that is committed to public safety, which is important for our community. But again, those cuts were felt across the organization. So it was not just felt in police and fire, it was felt across the organization. And they're difficult decisions to make. It's not an easy decision to make on where you're cutting and you're impacting people's lives and jobs and so forth. So those did happen the last time we did cut in other areas across the organization. And so again, it's not an easy decision to make, but we're constantly looking and analyzing our finances, our budget, to see what makes the most sense, not only for our organization, but for the community and the services that we provide.
Thank you. And then our last question for the day, Brian, will come from Tony, who asks, if the levy fails, do you plan to put it back on the ballot again? And how often will it be on the ballot?
Tony, a little premature to answer, but I would imagine that we would put it on the ballot at least another time before the current levy expires at the end of 2022. Not sure how many times or how often we would put it on the ballot. I think there's 3 additional general and primary elections that would be held before that 2022 period. I don't imagine us putting it on all 3 of those ballots if it does not pass in May. but we would definitely consider putting it back on, and we would probably reanalyze what's getting put on the ballot too, based off of what we hear from the community. Again, I'm a big believer in data. We've been doing surveys. Again, we want to utilize the resources that were provided from our community efficiently and effectively, and we want to make sure that we're providing the services that our community is looking for. And so it would probably involve looking again at what the community wants and needs, and analyzing it before we put it back on the ballot.
Very good. Brian, what do you want to end with?
One, I just want to say thank you for all the participation and the comments. They're great.
It was good today.
That's what we want. I've always said our best citizen is our most educated citizen. And so I'm glad that people are reaching out and asking those questions. That's important. We may not always agree on the answers, but I want you to at least have the information. And so I appreciate everybody participating and being involved and being engaged. That's what's important for our community, is being active and being engaged in the community that we live in. That's what makes it such a great place to live, work, and play.
Absolutely.
And I'm very proud of the accomplishments that our staff's been able to make in these last 4.5 years with the levy. We've been able to keep the promises we made. There's more to do in our community. We have so much potential to pursue in our community. We're seeing a lot of great things happening in Springfield, Ohio, and I'm excited for the future of our community.
You and me both. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We will be back in 2 weeks to touch base with you all again. As always, if you have any questions, you can shoot us a message on Facebook or call our office. But until then, we will see you guys soon. Have a great weekend.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.